The man knelt, his expensive suit creasing on the pavement, facing the furious grief of the 10-year-old boy who was unmistakably his son. "Why?" Noah cried, tears streaming down his face, small fists clenched. "Why did you leave, Mom? Why did you leave me before I was even born?" The accusation hung heavy in the air, a decade of silence shattering around them. "Wasn't she good enough?" the boy demanded, his voice choked with pain. "Wasn't I going to be good enough for you?" Julian Vance, the man who seemingly had everything money could buy, could only absorb the blows, the crushing weight of his past mistake mirrored in his son's devastated eyes. "Sorry doesn't fix it," Noah choked out between sobs. "You weren't here. Why come back now? Why?" The briefcase felt cool against Julian Vance's palm. Italian leather, flawless, reflecting the harsh O'Hare lights. It was a symbol of his world. 45 years old, Julian moved like a man sculpted by success. The suit, bespoke, sharp. The watch, a Patek Philippe, whispering wealth. He navigated the Friday morning surge, a current of hurried travelers, his destination the first-class lounge. Zurich awaited, another city, another deal. He looked the part, perfectly composed, utterly in control. But inside, a different story. A hollow echo chamber where achievements resonated briefly, then faded. Success had built him an empire, a penthouse view that stretched across Chicago's skyline. Yet it couldn't fill the persistent aching void. He checked his watch. Again, a nervous tick he despised. The flight was on time, of course. Everything in his life ran on schedule, except for the gnawing emptiness. He sighed, a sound instantly lost. Swallowed by the airport's impersonal roar, rolling luggage, disembodied announcements, the low hum of 1,000 separate journeys. Then the relentless forward motion of his life snagged. Stopped. A woman, walking past, her hand linked with a young boy's. Julian froze mid-stride. The briefcase suddenly felt leaden. His breath caught somewhere between his ribs. That profile, the gentle curve of her cheek, the way brown hair escaped her simple ponytail. It was impossible, yet undeniably familiar. 10 years evaporated, gone, the fortress around his memory breached. Ellie? The name was a faint whisper, disbelief clinging to it. Eleanor Hayes, his Ellie. Time had touched her, yes. Fine lines feathered the corners of her eyes, hinting at laughter, perhaps, or worry. But it was her. The core of her remained unchanged. And then the boy. The boy looked up, glancing towards the departure screens. Julian felt the air punched from his lungs. It wasn't just recognition, it was duplication. A living mirror reflecting a past Julian barely remembered. That untamed shock of blonde hair, those startlingly intense green eyes, his eyes. Staring back at him from a face sculpted with his own youthful lines. Even the way he walked, that slight, almost imperceptible bounce, identical. Memory hit him, not a gentle wave, but a physical impact. 10 years ago, a different city. A cramped apartment, yes, but filled with a warmth he hadn't valued. Moonlight, shadows. Himself, younger, colder, moving like a thief in the night. Packing a bag, he remembered the pen, scratching out cold final words onto cheap paper. Left on the kitchen table, "I need more than this. Don't try to find me." He remembered the flicker of guilt, quickly extinguished by the fire of ambition, fanned by the promises of Victoria Sterling, and he remembered Ellie. Asleep. Face peaceful, vulnerable, oblivious. Unaware that her world was about to crumble. He hadn't even said goodbye. His legs felt weak now, unreliable. A cold sweat broke out under the fine wool suit. Could it be? The thought was a frantic alarm bell. The timeline. 10 years. Was she pregnant then? Had there been hints? Words he'd dismissed, opportunities to listen that he, blinded by his own assent, had utterly ignored. Guilt constricted his throat, suffocating. Had he abandoned her, or had he abandoned them? A son? A son he never knew existed. The familiar emptiness inside him yawned into a terrifying abyss. He had to know. Urgency, raw and primal, surged through him, stronger than any market pressure, any boardroom demand. He lunged forward, pushing through the stream of people. "Ellie!" His voice was hoarse, lost in the terminal's din. He shoved past a startled businessman, mumbled an apology. The crowd felt thick, resistant, uncaring. "Ellie!" Louder this time, desperation clawed at the edges. He finally broke free, gasping, chest tight. He scanned the area wildly. Gone. They had simply vanished, melted back into the anonymous flow. He spun, frantic, searching every face. Brown hair, green eyes, nothing, just strangers. Moving on, oblivious. Sir, are you all right?" A flight attendant, concerned face, crisp uniform. He barely heard her. His focus was fixed on the empty space where they had stood. A space now filled with roaring silence and the crushing weight of 10 lost years. His phone vibrated, insistent. He glanced down. Victoria Sterling. A name. A life. The life he had chosen. It felt alien now, irrelevant. He jabbed the silence button. His eyes still searched the crowd, searching for ghosts. "Sir, final boarding call for Flight 112 to Zurich," the attendant repeated, her voice calm, professional. Julian looked at her, then at the gate, the portal to his known world. Deals, power, more. His gaze swept back across the vast, impersonal terminal. The past had just crashed into his present, and nothing else mattered. He met the attendant's eyes, his own distant, but a new, unshakable resolve settling within him. He cleared his throat. I'm not boarding." He turned, a simple pivot on the heel of his expensive shoe, but it felt momentous. Julian Vance walked away from Gate C-17, away from Zurich, away from the meticulously charted course of his life. The flight attendant's surprised expression blurred in his peripheral vision. He didn't register it. The familiar cacophony of O'Hare seemed to warp. The sounds sharpening, then receding, filtered through the disorienting shock that still vibrated within him. Each step towards the exit felt heavy, deliberate. He was moving against the current, a salmon fighting upstream against a river of departures. Outside, the Chicago air hit him, cool, damp, smelling faintly of jet fuel and exhaust. He raised a hand, almost automatically, hailing a cab. The yellow car pulled up, an island of mundane reality in his suddenly surreal world. "Downtown," he managed, the word thick in his throat as he slid onto the worn vinyl seat. The cab lurched into traffic. City buildings slid past the window, a familiar skyline rendered alien by the turmoil inside him. Julian leaned his head back, closing his eyes, but the image was seared behind his eyelids. A boy's face. His face. Those green eyes. Noah. Even the name felt strange, hypothetical yet terrifyingly real. Guilt churned, hot and acidic in his stomach. It wasn't just the memory of leaving Ellie anymore, it was the horrifying possibility of what he had left behind. Had she known? Back then? Had she tried to tell him? His mind snagged on a memory, sharper this time, less hazy than the initial shock. It wasn't the night he left. It was a few weeks before. Late evening. He'd just returned from a trip, sealing a deal, high on adrenaline, and the echo of Victoria Sterling's intoxicating praise in his ears. Ellie had been waiting up, curled on their worn sofa, a textbook open on her lap. She'd looked tired, but her eyes held a spark he hadn't seen often lately. "Julian," she'd started hesitantly, "I was thinking about that master's program again. The application deadline is soon, and maybe if we saved—" He remembered waving a dismissive hand, already reaching for his laptop. "Ellie, seriously? We've talked about this. Focus on your teaching. That degree won't magically double your salary, you know. Right now, I'm the one building our future." He hadn't even looked up, hadn't seen the spark in her eyes dim, hadn't noticed the slight slump of her shoulders. Had she wanted to say more? Had there been something else? Another reason for that tentative hope in her voice? He couldn't recall. He'd been too busy mapping out his own ascent, too deafened by ambition. The memory left a bitter taste, how arrogant he'd been, how blind. He pulled out his phone, several missed calls from Victoria Sterling. He swiped them away without a second glance. His thumb hovered over the contacts, scrolling past names associated with deals, power lunches, empty networking. Then he found it. Jack Riley, an old friend. More accurately, a friend from an older life before the relentless climb had consumed everything. A private investigator now. Julian hadn't spoken to him in years. He pressed call. It rang twice. Then a gruff, familiar voice. Riley. Jack? It's Julian. Julian Vance. A pause, then a dry chuckle. Vance. Well, I'll be damned. Calling from your private jet, or just slumming it with us mortals today? Julian ignored the sarcasm. His voice was tight. Jack, I need your help, urgently. He explained, words tumbling out. The airport, the woman who looked exactly like Ellie, the boy who looked exactly like him. Another pause on the line, longer this time. The cynical edge in Jack's voice softened, replaced by something cautious. Ellie Hayes? 10 years is a long time, Julian. Are you sure? I'm sure it was her. And the boy. Jack, I need you to find her. I need to know. Know what, exactly? Jack's voice was level now, professional, probing. Everything, Julian said, the word raw, where she lives. If the boy is hers, his name, his age. If he's mine. The unspoken question hung heavy in the silence. All right, Julian, Jack said finally, give me what you remember. Last known address, where she taught, anything. As Julian relayed the faded details, the cab pulled up outside a nondescript building downtown. Jack Riley's office. It was a world away from the gleaming steel and glass towers Julian usually frequented. He paid the driver, his hand slightly trembling. Inside, the office was functional, cluttered, smelling faintly of stale coffee and paperwork. Jack Riley, older now but with the same shrewd eyes, listened intently as Julian filled in the gaps, the raw edge of panic still vibrating beneath his controlled tone. When Julian finished, Jack leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He regarded Julian for a long moment. You understand what you're asking, right? You barge back in after 10 years. This could blow up lives, Julian. Hers, the kids, yours. I know. Julian ran a hand through his hair, the expensive styling coming undone. I know the risks, but I can't not know. I have to. He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the desperate need clawing inside him. Jack sighed, a sound heavy with unspoken history. But he picked up a notepad. Okay, I'll need a retainer, and this might take a few days, maybe longer. People move on. Whatever it takes, Julian said immediately, reaching for his wallet. Money is no object. Jack waved him off, his eyes sharp. We'll talk specifics later. He looked at Julian again, a knowing, almost pitying look. This isn't really about the money, is it, Julian? The question hung in the air as Jack turned to his computer, fingers already starting to fly across the keyboard. Julian stood there, feeling strangely exposed under the fluorescent lights of the small office. Money had always been his solution, his shield, his weapon. But now, it felt utterly inadequate. He was adrift, the weight of 10 years of silence, 10 years of unanswered questions threatening to pull him under. The search had begun, and he had no idea where it would lead or what wreckage it would uncover. He turned, a simple pivot on the heel of his expensive shoe, but it felt momentous. Julian Vance walked away from Gate C-17, away from Zurich, away from the meticulously charted course of his life. The flight attendant's surprised expression blurred in his peripheral vision. He didn't register it. The familiar cacophony of O'Hare seemed to warp, the sounds sharpening, then receding, filtered through the disorienting shock that still vibrated within him. Each step towards the exit felt heavy, deliberate. He was moving against the current, a salmon fighting upstream against a river of departures. Outside, the Chicago air hit him, cool, damp, smelling faintly of jet fuel and exhaust. He raised a hand almost automatically, hailing a cab. The yellow car pulled up, an island of mundane reality in his suddenly surreal world. Downtown, he managed, the word thick in his throat as he slid onto the worn vinyl seat. The cab lurched into traffic. City buildings slid past the window, a familiar skyline rendered alien by the turmoil inside him. Julian leaned his head back, closing his eyes, but the image was seared behind his eyelids. A boy's face, his face, those green eyes. Noah, Even the name felt strange, hypothetical, yet terrifyingly real. Guilt churned, hot and acidic in his stomach. It wasn't just the memory of leaving Ellie anymore, it was the horrifying possibility of what he had left behind. Had she known? Back then? Had she tried to tell him? His mind snagged on a memory, sharper this time, less hazy than the initial shock. It wasn't the night he left, it was a few weeks before. Late evening. He'd just returned from a trip, sealing a deal, high on adrenaline and the echo of Victoria Sterling's intoxicating praise in his ears. Ellie had been waiting up, curled on their worn sofa, a textbook open on her lap. She'd looked tired, but her eyes held a spark he hadn't seen often lately. "Julian," she'd started hesitantly, "I was thinking about that master's program again. The application deadline is soon, and maybe if we saved—" He remembered waving a dismissive hand, already reaching for his laptop. "Ellie, seriously, we've talked about this. Focus on your teaching. That degree won't magically double your salary, you know. Right now, I'm the one building our future." He hadn't even looked up, hadn't seen the spark in her eyes dim, hadn't noticed the slight slump of her shoulders. Had she wanted to say more? Had there been something else? Another reason for that tentative hope in her voice? He couldn't recall. He'd been too busy mapping out his own ascent, too deafened by ambition. The memory left a bitter taste. How arrogant he'd been. How blind. He pulled out his phone. Several missed calls from Victoria Sterling. He swiped them away without a second glance. His thumb hovered over the contacts, scrolling past names associated with deals, power lunches, empty networking. Then he found it. Jack Riley. An old friend. More accurately, a friend from an older life, before the relentless climb had consumed everything. A private investigator now, Julian hadn't spoken to him in years. He pressed call. It rang twice, then a gruff, familiar voice. "Riley." "Jack, it's Julian. Julian Vance." A pause, then a dry chuckle. "Vance. Well, I'll be damned. Calling from your private jet, or just slumming it with us mortals today?" Julian ignored the sarcasm. His voice was tight. "Jack, I need your help, urgently." He explained, words tumbling out. The airport, the woman who looked exactly like Ellie, the boy who looked exactly like him. Another pause on the line, longer this time. The cynical edge in Jack's voice softened, replaced by something cautious. "Ellie Hayes? 10 years is a long time, Julian. Are you sure?" "I'm sure it was her, and the boy. Jack, I need you to find her. I need to know." "Know what, exactly?" Jack's voice was level now, professional, probing. "Everything," Julian said, the word raw. "Where she lives, if the boy is hers, his name, his age, if he's mine." The unspoken question hung heavy in the silence. "All right, Julian," Jack said finally. "Give me what you remember. Last known address, where she taught, anything." As Julian relayed the faded details, the cab pulled up outside a nondescript building downtown. Jack Riley's office. It was a world away from the gleaming steel and glass towers Julian usually frequented. He paid the driver, his hand slightly trembling. Inside, the office was functional, cluttered, smelling faintly of stale coffee and paperwork. Jack Riley, older now but with the same shrewd eyes, listened intently as Julian filled in the gaps, the raw edge of panic still vibrating beneath his controlled tone. When Julian finished, Jack leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. He regarded Julian for a long moment. "You understand what you're asking, right? You barge back in after 10 years. This could blow up lives, Julian. Hers. The kids. Yours." "I know." Julian ran a hand through his hair, the expensive styling coming undone. "I know the risks, but I can't not know. I have to—" He trailed off, unsure how to articulate the desperate need clawing inside him. Jack sighed, a sound heavy with unspoken history, but he picked up a notepad. "Okay, I'll need a retainer, and this might take a few days, maybe longer. People move on." "Whatever it takes," Julian said immediately, reaching for his wallet. "Money is no object." Jack waved him off, his eyes sharp. "We'll talk specifics later." He looked at Julian again, a knowing, almost pitying look. "This isn't really about the money, is it, Julian?" The question hung in the air as Jack turned to his computer, fingers already starting to fly across the keyboard. Julian stood there, feeling strangely exposed under the fluorescent lights of the small office. Money had always been his solution, his shield, his weapon. But now, it felt utterly inadequate. He was adrift, the weight of 10 years of silence, 10 years of unanswered questions, threatening to pull him under. The search had begun, and he had no idea where it would lead or what wreckage it would uncover. Maple Street was quiet, tree-lined, worlds away from the concrete canyons Julian Vance usually navigated. He parked his rental car half a block down from Eleanor Hayes's house, engine off, watching. Waiting. For what, he wasn't entirely sure. The house itself was modest, well-kept, with a cheerful blue door and flower boxes spilling over with late spring blooms. A bicycle lay abandoned on the small patch of lawn. Simple, ordinary, painfully normal. He watched as a boy, Noah, his mind supplied, the name still feeling foreign, fragile, burst out the front door, chasing a soccer ball across the grass. He saw the easy way the boy moved, the unrestrained energy. He saw another man, sturdy build, kind face, David Miller, emerge from the house a moment later, tossing Noah an apple. He saw Ellie step onto the porch, smiling as she watched them, a picture of domestic tranquility. Julian's chest tightened. This was it. The life that continued after he detonated his own. He saw the casual affection between David and Noah, the comfortable intimacy between David and Ellie. A fierce, ugly knot of jealousy twisted inside him, instantly followed by a wave of profound shame. He was an intruder here, a ghost peering through the window of a life he had willingly forfeited. He had no right to feel anything but regret. Then Ellie looked up. Her gaze swept idly down the street, a casual glance, until it snagged on his car. On him. He saw the change instantly. The easy smile didn't drop. It froze. A sudden stillness overtook her, a quiet bracing, like a soldier preparing for impact. There was no fear in her eyes, not from this distance, just a sharp, unwelcome recognition, and something harder beneath it. Resolve. She started walking towards him, deliberate steps, not rushing, not hesitating. Julian's heart began to hammer against his ribs. He opened his car door, stepping onto the sidewalk, feeling exposed, wrong-footed. She stopped a few feet away. Her voice when she spoke was low, level, but vibrating with a tightly controlled fury that was somehow more intimidating than shouting. "What are you doing here, Julian?" He swallowed, the sound loud in the quiet street. "Ellie, I saw you, at the airport." His voice sounded rusty, unfamiliar. With Noah. "I had to come, I had to know." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Had to?" The words were clipped, sharp. "After 10 years of absolute silence, you had to show up on my street, parked outside my house." "You have no right, Julian, none." The boundary was drawn, clear and unyielding. "Please," he pleaded, hating the desperation he heard in his own voice. He looks just like me. Ellie, he's my son, isn't he?" She didn't flinch. Her gaze held his, steady and unflinching, though he thought he saw a flicker of old pain deep within them. "Yes," she said, the single word falling like a stone between them. "Noah is your biological son." She paused, letting the weight land. "The son you abandoned before he even drew his first breath. The son you never once asked about. The son whose life you walked away from without a backward glance." Each statement was a precise incision. "I didn't know," he whispered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "If I had known—" "Don't," she cut him off, a flash of fire in her eyes now. "Don't you dare try to rewrite history, Julian. You made your choice. You chose more, remember?" The word hung there, laden with the weight of his betrayal. "You don't get to reappear 10 years later and demand anything." Just then, another car pulled up to the curb behind Ellie. David Miller got out, his brow furrowed slightly as he took in the scene. Ellie rigid, facing a well-dressed stranger who radiated tension. He walked over, placing a light protective hand on Ellie's arm. "Ellie, everything okay here?" His voice was calm, questioning. He looked from Ellie's tight expression to Julian's obvious distress. "Do you?" Know this man? Before Ellie could answer, the distant rumble of a school bus grew louder. It rounded the corner, brakes hissing as it stopped a few doors down. Panic flared in Ellie's eyes, pure maternal instinct. "Julian, leave," she hissed, her voice urgent. "Now, don't let him see you." He hesitated, torn between the desperate urge to see his son up close and the shame of his own presence causing this fear. But Ellie's fierce protectiveness was absolute. He retreated, stepping back behind the thick trunk of an old maple tree, lining the sidewalk, feeling like a coward. He watched as Noah hopped off the bus, backpack slung over one shoulder, calling out, "Mom, hey David." The boy ran towards them, oblivious. Julian's heart ached with a fierce, possessive longing he had no right to feel. He watched David greet Noah with an easy smile, ruffling his hair. He watched Ellie force a bright, reassuring smile onto her face as she knelt to hug her son. The perfect picture. The life he wasn't in. Ellie guided Noah and David towards the house, but she paused at the door, turning back for one last intense look towards where Julian hid. Her voice was barely a whisper, but carried clearly across the quiet street, sharp as ice. "Stay away from him, Julian. Stay away from us. Don't you dare ruin this." The blue door closed, firmly, decisively, sealing him out. He leaned against the rough bark of the tree, the world tilting slightly. He heard the faint click of the lock. He was outside, alone. The ghost at the feast. Devastation washed over him, cold and complete. But beneath it, something else stirred, a flicker of stubborn resolve. He had made an unforgivable mistake. He had shattered lives. But hiding, vanishing again, that wasn't an option. Not this time. Inside the house, Ellie leaned heavily against the closed door, her body trembling. David's hand was gentle on her shoulder. "Ellie," David's voice was quiet, laced with concern and a dawning, unavoidable question. Who was that man? And what did he mean? About Noah. Ellie closed her eyes, the carefully constructed walls of her present beginning to tremble under the sudden violent tremors from her past. She owed David the truth, but the question echoed his unspoken fear, the one now hanging heavy and suffocating in the warm air of their home. What does this mean for us? The days following the confrontation settled into a tense, painful rhythm for Julian. He kept his distance, honoring the fury in Ellie's eyes, the raw plea to stay away. But he couldn't leave. Not yet. He rented a different, less conspicuous car. Parked further down Maple Street, sometimes blocks away, watching from the anonymous shield of tinted windows. He became a reluctant student of their lives. He saw Noah leave for school each morning, sometimes walking with David, sometimes riding his bike. He saw David leave for work shortly after. He saw Ellie come and go, trips to the grocery store, afternoons spent in the small garden, evenings when David returned and lights flickered on inside the house. Each glimpse was a fresh twist of the knife, the ordinary domestic moments he had thrown away, the milestones missed, the daily tapestry of a life he had no part in weaving. Guilt was a constant companion, heavy and suffocating. Yet beneath the guilt, a fragile, desperate yearning grew. Just to connect, even fleetingly. One sunny afternoon, he saw his chance. Noah was walking home from the bus stop alone, kicking a stray pebble down the sidewalk. Julian took a breath, got out of his car, grabbing a soccer ball he'd inexplicably bought the day before from the passenger seat. He walked casually along the opposite sidewalk, timing his approach. "Hey, kid," he called out, trying to sound nonchalant, holding up the ball. "Is this yours?" "Found it near the curb." Noah stopped, looking up. His green eyes, those eyes, were wary, guarded. He shook his head, blonde hair catching the sunlight. "No, not mine." "Oh." Julian felt awkward, exposed. "Thought maybe it rolled out of your yard." He forced a smile. "You play much?" Noah shrugged, relaxing just a fraction. He seemed less guarded now, perhaps just seeing a random man, not the stranger who had upset his mom. "Sometimes," he replied, "with David." The name landed like a tiny dart. Julian kept the smile fixed, though it felt brittle. "Cool," he managed. "David seems like a good guy." He searched for something, anything, to keep the fragile connection alive. "You know, I used to play a lot. Soccer, when I was about your age." That caught Noah's interest. A flicker of genuine curiosity lit his eyes. Really? Were you any good? The simple, direct question, devoid of adult complexity, momentarily disarmed Julian. A real, wistful smile touched his lips. Yeah, he admitted, a ghost of his younger self surfacing. I thought I was pretty good, actually. They stood there for a moment, an odd pair on the quiet suburban street. The successful businessman and the boy who should have been his. Then Noah glanced towards his house. I gotta go, he said, the moment broken. Mum's probably waiting. Sure. Okay. Julian felt a pang of loss as the brief interaction ended. Nice talking to you, Noah. Noah offered a small, hesitant wave and then ran off towards the blue front door, leaving Julian standing alone on the sidewalk. His heart felt strangely full and painfully empty all at once. It was just a few words, a shared moment about soccer, but it felt like finding a single drop of water in a vast desert. Enough to keep him hoping, enough to make the ache worse. Later that evening, back in the sterile quiet of his hotel room, the memory of Ellie's face from years ago surfaced again. Not the night he left, but another evening, drenched in his own self-importance. She'd been excited, talking about a community art project she wanted to start, something small, local, needing only modest funding she hoped to raise. He remembered scoffing. An art project, Ellie? Seriously? He'd said, pouring himself an expensive scotch. Focus on reality. I'm closing the Sterling merger next quarter. That's real impact. That's building something lasting. Your little paintings. They're a nice hobby, but let's be honest, they're not going to change the world, are they? He'd seen the light go out of her eyes then too. Seen her carefully fold the sketches she'd been showing him, her shoulders slumping almost imperceptibly. He hadn't cared. Her dreams seemed insignificant compared to the empire he was building. An empire built, he now realized with sickening clarity, on the foundations of his own monumental arrogance and neglect. Meanwhile, across town, in a penthouse apartment that dripped with cold, minimalist luxury, Victoria Sterling stared at the final page of a typed report, her knuckles white, where she gripped the edge of her glass desk. Her own private investigator, meticulous, expensive, and entirely discreet, had delivered his findings. Julian's sudden trip cancellation, his secretive stay in a downtown hotel, his repeated visits to a quiet street called Maple, his communication with an old acquaintance, a PI named Jack Riley. And then the final paragraphs, Eleanor Hayes, the former wife, living modestly, and the boy, Noah Hayes, age 10, blonde hair, green eyes, a striking resemblance to Julian Vance. Victoria's immaculately applied lipstick thinned into a hard line. A son. The absolute cheating fool. A secret son he'd kept hidden for 10 years. No wonder he'd been distant, distracted. No wonder he'd suddenly abandoned their Zurich trip. It wasn't business stress. It was this. This suburban cliché. A cold fury, sharp and calculating, settled over her. This wasn't just infidelity of the heart. It was a betrayal of their entire partnership, the life of power and influence they had cultivated. Did he really think he could just trade her, trade this, for some faded memory and a bastard child? She stood up, pacing the plush carpet, her sharp heels silent. Her mind raced, discarding emotional wreckage, focusing purely on strategy. Divorce was inevitable now. Obvious, but it wouldn't be quiet, it wouldn't be amicable. Oh no. Julian wanted to walk away. She would ensure he crawled. A cruel, knowing smile touched her lips. Leverage. She had it now. Financial records, whispered deals Julian thought were buried, connections he thought were secure. She knew where the skeletons were hidden, and she had just found the key to the closet. She picked up her secure phone, her fingers dialing a familiar number with practiced speed. Jonathan, she said when the call connected, her voice smooth as silk, cold as ice. It's Victoria Sterling. There was a pause. Yes, regarding Mr. Vance. Plans have changed somewhat. I need you to initiate divorce proceedings, immediately. Another pause. And Jonathan, prepare to freeze everything. Assets, accounts, holding companies, the works. I want him locked down tight. She listened for a moment, then continued, her voice dropping slightly, becoming almost conspiratorial. And start digging. Deeper, everything from the last 10 years. Every contract, every consulting fee, every offshore whisper. I want ammunition, enough to bury him. She paused again, swirling the ice in the untouched drink on her desk. Oh, and one more thing. There's a woman, Eleanor Hayes, and her 10-year-old son, Noah, Maple Street. Find out everything about them. School records, financial status, social connections. Leave no stone unturned. She listened, nodded curtly. Excellent. Keep me informed. Victoria ended the call, placing the phone down with a soft click. The smile remained, sharp and dangerous. Julian thought he could choose a different life. Fine, she'd simply ensure he had no life left to choose. The game was on, and Victoria Sterling always played to win. Back on Maple Street, Julian finally started his car, the engine a low rumble in the quiet afternoon. He glanced one last time towards the house with the blue door, oblivious to the storm clouds gathering on his horizon, holding on to the fragile warmth of a brief conversation about soccer. The secret festered inside Ellie like a wound. Every time Noah looked at her with his clear, trusting eyes, Julian's eyes, the guilt twisted tighter. David's quiet question, "What does this mean for us?" echoed in the spaces between them, unanswered. David was patient, kind, but she could feel the unspoken tension, the careful way he navigated around the invisible fault line Julian's reappearance had created. She knew, with a certainty that settled cold and heavy in her gut, that she couldn't keep it hidden any longer. Noah deserved the truth, however painful, and perhaps, selfishly, she needed to lance the boil before it poisoned everything she'd built. She chose a quiet Saturday afternoon, sat down with Noah on the living room sofa, the worn cushions familiar beneath them. His feet didn't quite touch the floor yet. He looked up from his comic book, sensing the gravity in her posture. "Noah, honey," she began, her voice softer than she intended. Remember when you asked David about your biological father?" Noah nodded slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to a familiar wariness. He'd stopped asking lately. Ellie took a deep, shaky breath. "Well, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." She met his gaze directly. The man we saw at the airport. The one who talked to you about the soccer ball." Noah's eyes widened slightly. He remembered. That man. His name is Julian Vance. Ellie forced the words out, each one feeling like a betrayal of the peace she had fought so hard to maintain. Noah, he is your biological father." Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Noah stared at her, his face a kaleidoscope of emotions. Confusion warring with disbelief, then a dawning, wounded comprehension. "That guy?" His voice was small at first, incredulous, then it rose, cracking with hurt and sudden anger. "He's my dad. The one who just left." He scrambled off the sofa, standing now, his small body trembling. "Why didn't you tell me? You let him talk to me. You both lied." The accusation hit Ellie harder than any physical blow. "Noah, please, listen," she tried, reaching for him, tears blurring her own vision. "It's so complicated. I only wanted to protect you from— Protect me," he shouted, yanking his arm away, tears streaming down his face now. "Protect me by lying. He abandoned us. He didn't want me. Why is he even here? Why does he get to just show up now?" The raw pain in his voice was agonizing. "I don't want to meet him. I don't want to know him. I hate him." He turned and fled, running up the stairs to his room, the slam of his door echoing through the small house like a gunshot. Ellie sank back onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, silent sobs shaking her shoulders. She had known it would be hard, but seeing the depth of his betrayal, the raw wound Julian's ghost had torn open, it was unbearable. Julian agreed to meet Victoria at a sleek, impersonal hotel bar downtown. Neutral territory. He needed to end it cleanly, decisively. He found her already seated, nursing a martini, looking immaculate and untouchable in a sharp black dress. "Julian," she greeted him, her voice smooth, offering a cheek for a kiss he didn't take. "Finally gracing me with your presence. I was beginning to think you'd vanished altogether. Zurich sends its regards, by the way." He sat opposite her, ignoring the bait. Victoria, he began, keeping his voice level, firm, I came here to tell you in person. It's over between us. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, taking a slow sip of her drink. Over? She echoed, a hint of amusement in her tone. Just like that? After 5 years? After everything we've built? After you ditch our Zurich trip without a word? This isn't working, he stated simply, refusing to be drawn into a fight about the past. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction. It hasn't been for a long time, you know that. And things have changed for me. Victoria placed her glass down with a soft click. A cold, knowing glint entered her eyes. Oh, I know things have changed, Julian, she purred, leaning forward slightly. The pretense of civility dropped away. I know all about your little detour down memory lane, your touching reunion with the sainted Eleanor, and of course, your precious secret, your 10-year-old son. Julian felt a chill despite the controlled temperature of the bar. She knew. How? It didn't matter. He kept his composure. My son and my past with Eleanor are not your concern, Victoria. She laughed then, a short, brittle sound devoid of humor. Not my concern? You made them my concern, Julian, the moment you started lying to me, sneaking around, prioritizing them over us, over everything we planned. Her voice hardened, turning sharp as shattered glass. You think you can just discard me like some outdated acquisition? Think again. He stood up. I'm not going to argue with you. My decision is made. Sit down, Julian. Her command was quiet but absolute. He hesitated, then slowly sat. She leaned closer, her voice a venomous whisper. You walk away from me, you walk away from this, and I promise you, you will have nothing left. Remember the Kensington deal, darling. Those charmingly vague facilitation fees to our friends overseas. I remember the wire transfers, or perhaps the creative accounting during the Argent Corp merger. So many potential misunderstandings that the SEC would just love to investigate. Her eyes bored into his. I have emails, recordings, account numbers, everything. You leave me, Julian, and I will personally burn your entire empire to the ground. You won't just lose your company, your reputation. You'll be lucky if you don't end up sharing a cell with common criminals. Is your newfound family worth that? He stared at her, seeing the ruthless calculation behind the beautiful mask. She meant it. Every word. He was trapped. Days later, the air thick with unspoken tensions, Julian found himself back near Maple Street. He couldn't stay away. Victoria's threats echoed in his mind, a cold counterpoint to the aching need to see Noah, even from a distance. He saw the boy riding his bike on the sidewalk, a flash of bright color against the green lawns. Suddenly, a large SUV, previously parked, reversed rapidly out of a driveway, the driver clearly not checking their mirrors. Straight into Noah's path. Time seemed to slow, the squeal of tires. Noah's startled cry. Julian didn't think. He moved. Pure instinct propelled him out of his car, sprinting across the street. He reached Noah just as the rear bumper was about to connect, shoving the boy hard, sending them both tumbling onto the soft grass of a neighboring lawn as the bike clattered under the SUV's wheel. His heart hammered against his ribs, adrenaline singing in his veins. He scrambled over to Noah, his hands automatically checking for injuries. Noah, are you okay? Are you hurt? Noah sat up, stunned, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. A scrape oozed blood on his elbow, but otherwise he seemed unharmed. He looked at Julian, really looked at him, comprehension dawning. You pushed me. Relief washed over Julian, so potent it made him dizzy. He wanted desperately to pull the boy into a hug, to hold him close, but he didn't dare cross that line. He helped Noah to his feet, his touch lingering for only a second too long. Yeah, he said, his voice rough. Just be more careful, okay? The driver, horrified, rushed out, apologies tumbling out. Julian dealt with them curtly, his entire focus on the shaken boy beside him, the boy whose life he had just saved. His son. That evening, the near miss, still casting a shadow over the small house, David Miller found Ellie sitting alone in the living room, staring blankly at the television. Noah was subdued, playing quietly in his room. David sat beside her, taking her hand. He felt the tremor that still ran through her. He's okay, Elle. David said softly. That's the main thing. It was just an accident. Ellie nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. She felt safe with David, grounded, but the ground felt increasingly unsteady beneath her feet. Julian's shadow loomed large, unpredictable. Perhaps it was the fragility of the moment, the reminder of how quickly things could change, that prompted David. He gently tilted her chin up, his eyes earnest, full of love and a desire to protect. Ellie, he began, his voice serious now, I know things are chaotic right now. Maybe that makes this crazy, or maybe it makes it more important than ever. He shifted, reaching into his pocket. I love you, Ellie, and I love Noah like he's my own. I want to make it official. I want to be your husband, Noah's legal stepfather. I want to build our forever, together, protect you both, always. He opened a small velvet box. Inside, a simple, elegant diamond glittered. Eleanor Hayes, he asked, his voice thick with emotion, will you marry me? Ellie stared at the ring, tears instantly springing to her eyes. Tears of gratitude, of affection for this good, kind man, but also tears of overwhelming confusion. Julian's face flashed in her mind, the desperation in his eyes on the street, the fierce relief after saving Noah. Noah's angry, tear-streaked face when she told him the truth. How could she say yes to David now? Drag him deeper into this mess? Commit to a future when her past was so violently, persistently present? David, she whispered, her voice choked. Oh, David. She couldn't look at the ring, she couldn't look at him. Her gaze drifted towards the window, towards the darkening street outside. She felt trapped, pulled in two directions, the weight of the past and the promise of the future colliding within her, leaving her paralyzed. The ring box remained open in David's hopeful, waiting hand. The near miss with the SUV lingered, an invisible tremor beneath the surface of Maple Street's calm facade. Noah was quieter than usual, the image of Julian, the stranger, the father, pushing him to safety, warring with the raw anger Ellie's confession had unleashed. He saw Julian again a day later, not lurking, but standing openly at the end of the block, hands thrust deep into his pockets, his gaze fixed not on the house, but on the pavement, looking utterly lost. Something inside Noah snapped. The confusion, the hurt, the 10 years of unanswered questions, it boiled over. Before he could think, he was marching down the sidewalk towards the man who had shattered his world before he was even born. Julian looked up as Noah approached, surprise flickering in his eyes, quickly followed by a guarded hope and a deep, weary sadness. Why? Noah's voice trembled, but he stood his ground, small fists clenched at his sides. Why did you leave her? Why did you leave me? The last word was almost choked out. Wasn't she good enough? Wasn't I going to be good enough? Julian visibly flinched, the raw pain in the boy's voice striking him more deeply than any accusation Victoria could level. He knelt slowly, bringing himself closer to Noah's eye level, not wanting to loom over him. Noah, he began, his own voice thick with emotion he didn't try to hide. No. Oh God, no. It was never ever about you, or your mum. Your mum was everything. Too good for me. The leaving, that was all me. He struggled for the words, wanting only complete honesty now. It was my selfishness, my ambition. I was a coward. I thought chasing money, chasing success was more important than love, than family, than being a decent human being. He looked directly into Noah's accusing green eyes. I didn't know about you when I left, Noah. I swear I didn't. But, his voice broke slightly, even if I had known. I was so lost then, so obsessed with myself, maybe I wouldn't have been the father you deserved anyway. And that doesn't excuse it, it's the shameful truth. He took a ragged breath. Leaving your mother, walking away from the possibility of you. It was the greatest mistake of my life. There hasn't been a day in 10 years I haven't regretted it on some level, even when I was too arrogant to admit it. I am so sorry, Noah, for the hole I left in your life, for the pain I caused your mum, for everything. Noah's face crumpled, tears finally spilling over, hot and angry. Sorry doesn't fix it, he cried, launching himself forward, his small fists beating ineffectually against Julian's expensive coat. You weren't here. You weren't. David was here. David taught me to ride my bike. David helps with my homework. You think pushing me out of the way of a car makes everything okay now? He was sobbing openly, the years of confusion and unspoken hurt pouring out. Julian didn't try to stop the blows, he simply absorbed them, accepting this raw, unfiltered pain as part of his long-overdue penance. No, Noah, he said softly when the boy's energy faded, pulling him gently into a hug Noah didn't initially resist. No, it doesn't make anything okay. Nothing I do can give you back those years. Nothing. He held his son, feeling the boy's small frame shake with sobs, his own tears blurring his vision. All I can do now, the only thing I can do, is try to face the truth. Try to do the right thing from now on, no matter what it costs me. It was in that moment, holding his weeping son, feeling the full crushing weight of his past failures, that the decision solidified. Victoria's threats, the precariousness of his empire, the fear of exposure, it all seemed secondary. The real reckoning wasn't financial. It was here, in the heartbroken eyes of the child he'd abandoned. The only path forward, the only way to potentially salvage a shred of integrity, perhaps even protect Noah and Ellie from the fallout of his toxic past with Victoria, was to detonate it himself, on his own terms. Just then, David Miller's car pulled up. He must have been on his way home. He got out, saw the scene, Julian holding a crying Noah, and his face tightened, a mixture of concern for Noah and undisguised tension towards Julian. Ellie, perhaps hearing the commotion, came quickly out of the house. Seeing the three of them, Noah wiping his eyes, Julian looking utterly wrecked, David standing stiffly, Ellie knew things had reached a tipping point. The fragile balance was broken. She walked over to David, putting a hand gently on his arm, pulling him slightly aside as Julian slowly released Noah. David, she said, her voice quiet but firm, full of a sad resolve. He looked down at her, his expression searching. I can't marry you. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. She saw the hurt flash in his eyes, quickly masked. Is it him? David asked, his voice strained, nodding almost imperceptibly towards Julian. Ellie shook her head, meeting his gaze honestly. Tears welled up again, but these were different. No, David, it's not about choosing him over you. It's about me. About needing to deal with this. She gestured vaguely towards Julian and Noah. This whole mess, this past. I need to navigate this without dragging you deeper into it. It wouldn't be fair. You deserve someone who can give you their whole heart without ghosts lingering in every room. She gently took the ring box from his pocket, where he must have kept it since proposing, and pressed it back into his hand. I'm so sorry, David. Truly. He stared at the box, then at her, his expression a mixture of pain and understanding. He nodded slowly, the kindness that defined him still present even in his hurt. Okay, Ellie, he murmured. Okay. He gave Noah a brief, reassuring look, then turned and walked back to his car, leaving Ellie standing there, heartbroken but feeling a strange, necessary clarity. The news broke the next morning. Julian, after a sleepless night, had instructed his lawyer to make contact with the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office, offering a full confession regarding specific financial irregularities tied to the Argent Court merger and the Kensington deal, the very leverage Victoria had threatened him with. He preempted her. The initial headlines were stark. Financial titan Julian Vance admits to fraud. Vance Corp shares plummet amidst scandal. Then came the second wave. Victoria, clearly incandescent with rage at being outmaneuvered or simply determined to inflict maximum damage, unleashed her own arsenal. Anonymous sources suddenly provided tabloids and news outlets with juicier details, exaggerated accounts of Julian's lavish spending, hints of other affairs, true or not, it didn't matter, and crucially, thinly veiled references to his sudden interest in a former flame and secret child. Maple Street transformed overnight. News vans choked the quiet road. Reporters camped out on sidewalks, microphones extended, cameras flashing relentlessly at Ellie's blue front door. They shouted questions whenever a curtain twitched. Mrs. Hayes, is it true Mr. Vance abandoned you? Noah, is Julian Vance your father? Are you the reason Vance confessed? Inside, Ellie drew the curtains tight, trying to shield a pale, frightened Noah from the invasive glare. The sanctuary she had built felt like a prison under siege. In his hotel room, Julian watched the chaos unfold on a giant flat-screen TV. He saw the footage of Ellie's house, the reporters swarming like insects. He saw his own face plastered across every news channel, his reputation meticulously shredded. His phone was blowing up. Lawyers, board members, former associates, he ignored them all. The empire he'd spent decades building was dissolving into ash. He felt a strange sense of detachment, almost relief. The weight of the lies, the threats, the constant maneuvering, it was gone, replaced now by the cold, hard reality of consequence. He picked up the phone, his hand steady. He dialed the number his lawyer had given him. "Yes," he said, his voice clear and calm when the connection was made. "This is Julian Vance. I understand you're looking for me." He paused. "I'm ready to cooperate fully. Tell me where I need to be." He hung up. The reckoning had arrived, and for the first time in a very long time, Julian Vance wasn't running from it. The media siege didn't relent. If anything, it intensified after Julian's public confession. Maple Street remained choked with vans, the relentless click of cameras a constant soundtrack. Inside the small house, the air was thick with tension. Noah had retreated into a shell, his earlier anger replaced by a withdrawn silence that frightened Ellie more than any outburst. He barely spoke, picked at his food, his eyes haunted by the chaos swirling outside and the fractured truths revealed within. The pressure mounted, a call from Noah's school principal expressing concern, whispers from neighbors, the constant awareness of being watched. It became too much. Late one afternoon, while Ellie was on a strained phone call, trying to reassure her worried mother, Noah scribbled a hasty note, grabbed his backpack and slipped out the back door, unseen. When Ellie discovered the empty room, the open window, the crumpled note on his bedside table, "Need to think. Don't look for me." Sheer, unadulterated terror seized her. All the strength she'd cultivated over 10 years dissolved in an instant. Her first primal instinct cut through the fog of her own complicated feelings. She called Julian. "He's gone," she cried into the phone the moment he answered, her voice choked with panic. "Julian, Noah's run away." Whatever Julian had been doing, whatever preparations he was making for his surrender, became instantly irrelevant. "Where are you? I'm on my way." "Now," he said, his own voice tight with fear. He arrived minutes later, pushing through the ghoulishly persistent reporters who surged forward at the sight of him. He found Ellie on the porch, pale and trembling. In that moment, they weren't the estranged couple, the abandoner and the abandoned. They were simply two parents, united by the terrifying possibility of losing their child. "We'll find him, Ellie," Julian promised, his hand briefly, instinctively covering hers where it gripped the railing. "We will." They started immediately, calling his name down the quiet streets, checking the local park where he sometimes played, peering into neighbors' yards, their voices growing hoarser, their fear mounting with each passing minute, each empty space where Noah should have been. Dusk began to bleed across the sky, painting the suburban landscape in shades of grey and purple, deepening their dread. Just as true darkness began to settle, David Miller pulled up. He must have seen the escalating news reports, the frantic scene outside Ellie's house. He got out, his face etched with concern, putting aside whatever pain Ellie's recent rejection had caused him. "Ellie? Julian?" His voice was steady. "Any word? What can I do?" Ellie looked at him, a flicker of gratitude cutting through her panic. "David, thank you. We don't know where he is." Without hesitation, David joined the search, the three of them fanning out, covering more ground, a strange temporary alliance forged by shared worry for the boy they all, in their different ways, loved. It was Julian who found him. A sudden gut feeling pulled him towards a place further afield. An older, slightly neglected park on the other side of the neighborhood. A place he had taken Ellie on one of their first dates, laughing on the rusty swing set under the summer stars. Had she ever mentioned it to Noah? He didn't know, but he drove there anyway, a desperate hope warring with logic. And there he was. A small, solitary figure perched on one of the old swings, silhouetted against the deepening twilight. Julian's heart simultaneously leaped and plummeted. He got out of the car quietly, approaching slowly across the damp grass, careful not to startle him. "Noah?" he called softly. The boy looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed in the dim light, his face smudged with dirt and tears, but his jaw was set with a defiant tension. "Why'd you come?" Noah asked, his voice thick but steady. "Why couldn't you just leave us alone?" "Everything's ruined now. Because of you." Julian stopped a few feet away, then slowly sat on the swing beside him. The metal chains creaked mournfully. He didn't offer excuses, he didn't try to minimize the damage. "Because leaving," Julian said, his voice low, heavy with the weight of truth, "was the biggest, stupidest mistake of my life, Noah. And I've regretted it every single day since, even when I was too arrogant or too scared to admit it properly." He looked out at the darkening park. "I came back because I saw you at the airport. And once I saw you, once I knew, I couldn't just disappear again. Even though I knew," he paused, swallowing hard, "I knew I'd probably just make a bigger mess. Which I clearly have." Noah kicked at the dirt beneath the swing. "Mum's crying all the time. David left. Those people with cameras won't go away. And Mum said, 'You're going to prison.'" He recited the facts flatly, each one a testament to the wreckage Julian had caused. "Yes," Julian confirmed quietly. "All of that is my fault. My responsibility. And yes, Noah, I am going to prison. It's the consequence. It's what I have to do to pay for the things I did wrong. The money stuff, yes. But mostly," his voice cracked, "mostly for leaving, for hurting your mom, for not being here for you." He looked at his son, his heart aching. "Nothing I can say will ever change the past, Noah. Nothing can make up for those 10 years. But I need you to know this, even if you hate me forever, even if you never want to see me again after I go, I love you. I think somehow I loved you even before I knew you existed." Tears tracked silently down Noah's cheeks in the dim light. He didn't speak for a long moment. Just sat there, absorbing the raw, painful honesty. Just then, hurried footsteps sounded across the grass. Ellie rushed towards them, David close behind her, their faces etched with relief. "Noah! Oh, thank God!" Ellie knelt, pulling the boy into a fierce hug. The fragile moment was shattered by another arrival. A sleek black car pulled up silently on the access road. Victoria Sterling emerged, looking incongruously elegant against the backdrop of the rundown park. Her eyes, cold and assessing, fixed on Julian. "Well, well," she drawled, her voice dripping with contempt. "How incredibly pathetic. The broken little family, reunited amongst the rust and decay. Enjoying your last taste of freedom, Julian. Decided to throw away everything we built for this." She gestured dismissively towards Ellie and Noah. Julian stood up slowly, deliberately placing himself between Victoria and his son. The fear he'd felt during their last encounter was gone, replaced by a calm, weary resolve. "It's over, Victoria," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Leave them alone. This has nothing to do with them anymore." David instinctively moved to stand slightly beside and behind Julian, a silent, unexpected gesture of solidarity focused purely on protecting Ellie and Noah. Victoria assessed the scene, Julian's unshakable calm, David's quiet support, Ellie protectively holding Noah. She saw the shift. Her leverage was gone. Her power over him had evaporated the moment he chose confession over concession. A sneer twisted her lips. "You'll rot in prison, Julian," she spat, "and believe me, they'll forget all about you soon enough." She turned, slid back into her car, and was gone, leaving only the faint scent of expensive perfume and lingering bitterness in the night air. A tense silence fell over the small group. Julian turned back, his gaze meeting Ellie's, then Noah's. David respectfully took a small step back. "I'm sorry," Julian said again, the words encompassing everything. "For all of this. For the chaos." He looked directly at Noah, then Ellie. "I meant what I said. I'm turning myself in tomorrow morning. You won't have to deal with me or the reporters much longer." Noah wiped his eyes, looking from his father's genuinely pained face to his mother's tear-streaked one. He took a shaky breath. Are you really going to prison? Julian nodded sadly. Yes, Noah. I expect so. I did wrong things, and I have to face the consequences. Another moment of silence stretched, broken only by the distant city hum. Then Noah spoke again, his voice small but clear, hesitant yet determined. But what if I want to get to know you? A little bit? Before you go? Hope, sharp and overwhelming, surged through Julian. He looked at Ellie, whose own eyes were wide with surprise and glistening with fresh tears. She knelt beside Noah again, hugging him tight. Oh, honey, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. That's your choice, whatever you decide. Julian met Ellie's gaze over Noah's head. An unspoken understanding passed between them, complex, fragile, but undeniably there. They stood together under the faint glow of the park lights, the father who had left, the mother who had stayed, the son caught between them and the kind man who had held them together. A broken, unconventional configuration, finding a precarious balance in the eye of the storm. David watched them, a poignant, accepting sadness in his expression. He knew his role now, at least for the moment. Julian looked towards the city lights, the place where his surrender awaited. Prison loomed, a stark and terrifying reality. Yet for the first time since stepping off that plane that wasn't, facing the consequences felt less like an ending and more like a painful, necessary, terrifying step forward. Tomorrow, he thought, the word resonating with both dread and the faintest, most fragile glimmer of hope. Tomorrow the real work begins. The gavel fell with a sharp finality that echoed in the hushed courtroom. Julian Vance stood straight, unflinching, as the judge delivered the sentence. Guilty on multiple counts of financial fraud and conspiracy. 2 years in a federal correctional facility, full forfeiture of illegally obtained assets, restitution orders that would strip away the last vestiges of his once vast fortune. He didn't flinch. In the gallery he saw Ellie watching him, her expression unreadable but steady. Beside her, Noah looked small, his eyes wide, taking it all in. Julian met his son's gaze briefly, offering a small, almost imperceptible nod, an acknowledgement, perhaps an apology. Then he was led away. Prison was a stark, leveling reality. The designer suits were replaced with standard-issue khakis, the penthouse view with grey concrete walls, the relentless pace of high finance with the grinding monotony of institutional routine. Yet, within that confinement, Julian found a strange kind of freedom. Freedom from the lies, the pretense, the constant pressure to acquire more. He didn't waste the time. He read voraciously. He enrolled in online courses through the prison library, business ethics, sociology, even child psychology, trying desperately to understand the world he had failed so profoundly. He attended voluntary group sessions, listening more than he spoke, hearing stories of regret and consequence that resonated with his own. The visits from Noah began tentatively, supervised at first, in a sterile room filled with other fractured families. The initial conversations were stilted, awkward. "How's school?" Julian would ask. "Okay," Noah would reply, fidgeting, his eyes often drifting away. But slowly, painstakingly, something began to shift. Ellie remained a quiet presence during visits, ensuring boundaries were respected, but she allowed the connection to form. Noah, perhaps sensing the genuine change in the subdued man opposite him, started asking questions, real questions. "Why did you think money was more important than people?" he asked one visiting day, his brow furrowed with a child's blunt honesty. Julian didn't deflect. "Because I was weak, Noah," he answered quietly, "and scared. Scared of not being enough. I thought money would make me feel strong. I was wrong." Another time, "Were you ever sad? After you left Mom?" "Every day," Julian admitted, the truth raw. "Even when I didn't let myself feel it." They found slivers of common ground. Julian, using his analytical mind, helped Noah grasp a complex math problem. They talked about soccer strategies. Julian listened, truly listened, perhaps for the first time in his life, as Noah talked about his friends, his science projects, his life with Ellie and David. A fragile bridge was being built, girder by careful girder, across the chasm of 10 lost years. Life outside the prison walls continued. Julian learned through a carefully worded letter from Ellie that she and David Miller were getting married. He read the news with a complex mix of emotions, a sharp pang of what might have been, quickly followed by a genuine sense of relief. Ellie deserved stability. Noah deserved a happy, secure home. David, he admitted to himself, was a good man who provided that. He sent a simple, heartfelt card of congratulations. 2 years later, Julian Vance walked out of the correctional facility gates a different man. Thinner, older, the arrogance replaced by a quiet humility. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a worn jacket. Jack Riley was there to meet him, a rare smile touching his lips. No fanfare, no waiting limo. Just freedom and the daunting prospect of starting over from less than zero. Re-entry wasn't easy. Finding work with a felony record, even with his background, was immensely challenging. He lived in a small, sparsely furnished apartment, worlds away from his former life. But he found purpose. He volunteered, then eventually secured a modest position at a non-profit organization that consulted with struggling small business owners and aspiring entrepreneurs in underserved communities. He used his sharp financial acumen not to amass wealth, but to empower others, finding a quiet satisfaction in helping dreams take flight, a satisfaction his millions had never provided. The dynamic with his son settled into a new kind of normal. Weekends often involved cautious visits, trips to the park, helping Noah with homework that was rapidly becoming more complex. He attended Noah's school science fair, standing awkwardly but proudly alongside Ellie and David. The three adults navigated their unusual relationship with a quiet respect, their focus always centered on Noah's well-being. Conversations between Julian and David were polite, sometimes reserved, but never hostile. An unspoken understanding existed. Between Julian and Ellie, there was a sense of closure, tinged with the shared history and the undeniable bond of their son. Forgiveness hadn't erased the past, but it had allowed for a peaceful present. One crisp autumn afternoon, Julian watched Noah, now a headstrong 12-year-old, laughing as David helped him adjust the gears on his bike outside Ellie's house. The familiar pang of longing was still there, a dull ache reminding him of what he'd lost. But it was overlaid now with something warmer, gratitude. Gratitude that Noah was happy, loved, thriving. Gratitude for this second chance, however imperfect. Ellie came out onto the porch, saw Julian waiting to pick Noah up for their afternoon outing. She smiled, a genuine, gentle smile that reached her eyes. He smiled back. No grand declarations were needed. The years of pain hadn't vanished, but they no longer defined their interaction. They had found a way forward. Later, walking home alone from his office as the city lights began to twinkle on, Julian passed a park. He saw a father pushing his young son on a swing, their easy laughter drifting on the evening air. He paused for a moment, watching them, a peacefulness settling over him that felt more valuable than any stock portfolio. He had lost an empire. He had forfeited years he could never reclaim. But in the ruins, he had found something else, the tentative growing trust of his son. A measure of peace with his past, a purpose beyond profit. He continued his walk, not towards a gleaming penthouse, but towards his simple apartment down the street. The road ahead was still long, the work of redemption never truly finished. But as he walked, Julian Vance knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that for the first time in a very long time, he was finally, truly, on the right path. One quiet, intentional step at a time. And so Julian Vance walks a new path now. The dazzling gleam of his former empire is gone. In its place, a quiet commitment to integrity, to connection, to simple humanity. His journey of redemption is far from over. It will take time. It will demand continued effort. But he understands now. He lost a fortune, yet gained something infinitely more valuable. The fragile trust of his son. A measure of peace. A second chance. Perhaps this story reminds us that mistakes don't have to be the final chapter, that second chances are real, but they must be earned through honesty, through facing the consequences, through the hard, necessary work of mending what was broken. It speaks to the enduring power of forgiveness and the complex, resilient strength of family ties, however they are tested, however they are formed. We hope the story of Julian, Ellie, and Noah resonated with you, perhaps touched your heart in some way. If you felt a connection to their journey, or if this story made you think, please show your support with a like on this video. Consider sharing it with friends or family. Maybe they too would appreciate a story about hope, regret, and the possibility of change. And most importantly, we truly want to hear from you. Please leave a comment below. Tell us, how did this story make you feel? What lessons or messages stood out to you the most? Or, do you have any suggestions? How can our channel bring you even better stories that truly move you in the future? Your thoughts, your feedback, your interaction, it means the world to us and keeps these stories coming. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.